Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Hey, I don't know how many of our episodes you've tuned into. We're at about 131 or so now, but we appreciate each time we get to reconnect. And today we're also going to connect with David Essel. David's an author, a counselor, a life coach, a motivational speaker, and so much more. But one of the things that gets me after reading of his work with addiction and everything that surrounds that is the idea that he's not a traditional thinker. I hope you're okay with that, David. Do you think that fits?
Randy, I think that is a very, very well-spoken word and title for me. Unconventional. I don't follow the rules. Everything that you can think of, you're 100% correct.
I think this is going to work great. I've got a little of that in me myself. There are those things within the addiction and recovery world that I've caught myself thinking and saying, but I've not been able to complete that thought. I haven't been able to say certain things with the commitment that I want to. And I'll talk more about that as we go here. But we're looking forward to what you have to say. So go ahead and introduce yourself to our folks, please.
Yeah, Randy, I mean, 45 years now as a counselor, all-faith minister, #1 best-selling author. You know, the titles go on and on. I feel was one of the most blessed persons in this world doing this work for 45 years. Randy, I mean, I can't imagine there's anything else that could bring me this level of fulfillment. Unless I was an NBA star, and I always wanted to be an NBA basketball star. That didn't happen, so my second choice actually has turned out great. But I started, in the world of sports as a little kid. I was sleeping with my basketball every night at 5 years of age in my bed. My mom was not appreciative because the ball was always filled with mud or grass or something. But, I had a crazy attraction to basketball. And I ended up playing, of course. I played at Syracuse University. And then when I got out of there, I got a degree in sports psychology, started working with athletes, bodybuilders, all with their head, all making sure that they're focused and structured and organized and that. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I honestly started to burn out. Working with athletes all the time is great. I had a lot of fun. But, we found out, and I'll tell you in the next section of how we found this out, we found out that, I had some mental challenges myself that were never diagnosed as a child. I had some very difficult childhood experiences. My addiction started at 12. And one of the reasons my addiction started at 12 is some of these things that we're going to talk about. And so I wanted to broaden, and I wanted to go into more than just the world of sports. And in 1990, my world came crashing down, and I had a failed suicide attempt. If you looked at me from the outside, you go, oh my God, the guy lives on the beach. He drives a Mercedes. He's got, the world by the tail. But that's not true in the world of mental health, and it's not true in the world of addiction. So how did a counselor, how did a best-selling author, how did he get himself in a position of wanting to take his life? And, there's a couple pretty simple answers here. Number one, I remember in 1959 being in the doctor's office. The doctors were smoking in the offices back then.
Of course.
Smoking cigarettes when I was, and I know this is true, Randy. And, and they said there's nothing wrong with your son. It must be allergies. I had a horrendous temper. My mom and dad didn't know how to deal with me. I was definitely the black sheep. My sister and brother followed everything they said to a T, and I didn't follow a thing. So I started at 12 in my world of addiction, trying to escape my family life, quite frankly. And then in 1990, everything came crashing down. I had used alcohol and cocaine for so many years. I had used positive thinking. Now, Randy, this is very interesting. I had used positive thinking as a way to escape the reality of my addiction. And the most famous affirmation I used from 1980 until 1990 was, I am David Essel, a child of God, happy, healthy, and sober today. And it was a complete lie. So we can use positive thinking to avoid doing the work in the world that we want to do. And a lot of people do it all the time. You know, I'm a size 8 when they're a size 16. You know, when we've been taught this nonsense through like the law of attraction and The Secret and some of these other crazy programs that are so ineffective and so kindergarten-like. It's crazy that they've succeeded as far as they have. But, you know, that failed suicide attempt was actually, as strange as it sounds, one of the most incredible blessings, because it opened up a couple things. First of all, the doctor said, you know, and in psychotherapy, this is how we start our sessions, you know, what was the origin? What was the origin that got you so clinically depressed, so out of your mind as a motivational speaker, as a guy that travels 40 weeks a year, lifting the hearts and souls of millions of people? Like, what's the origin? And, you know, through psychological testing, and I told him it wasn't true. The very first thing we did is he came back with these tests and he said, David, you struggled with deep clinical depression probably your whole life. You have generalized anxiety disorder. You've probably had it since a little kid. And he went on and on with all these conditions. And Randy, I said, you know, Doc, I got to tell you something. Listen, I don't know as much as you do, okay? You're the psychiatrist. But that can't be true. You know, it just can't be true that, you know, all of this stuff that I've had my whole life. And he said, okay, go to another center and get your mental health test there, the same test that we're doing, and let's compare results. Well, Randy, you know what happened. I came back from the other center and the results were identical. So this was huge for me because it taught me something that we're going to talk about right now. And that is, every addiction is created by our inability to deal with some form of emotional experience. Every addiction in the world is created by our inability to deal with emotions. Emotions like abandonment, criticism, addiction in a family system, the inability to express your emotions as a child. Trauma comes in many, many, many different forms. Doesn't just come with a military person coming home from Afghanistan. I mean, my God, you know, we write stories in our book of people that we've worked with PTSD that had nothing to do with the war. So, you know, I've started really looking into this, and I said, wait a minute, you know, people are saying that alcoholism is caused by our genetics. That's not true. That's impossible, because if it was caused by our genetics, then the only healing tool would be a genetic manipulation called medicine or surgery or something else like that. But there's nothing that they've found to help a person get sober. There's no medical treatment that guarantees sobriety. So we know it's not based on genetics. We know that alcoholism isn't based on your family history. Now, I'll make an add here. There is a genetic link because we have it in our family. We have the genome for alcoholism. I have an aunt that died of alcoholism. My brother and I were alcoholics forever. My brother just got sober about 8 years ago. I'm so proud of him. But the addiction gene lies dormant and cannot be activated without you choosing choice to put alcohol in your body. And if you do it regularly enough, that gene will get tripped like it did for me and my brother. And all of a sudden, 2 isn't enough, and 4 isn't enough, and 6 isn't enough. And it's because of the fact that we have not dealt with something. Now, at 12 years of age, Randy, and I know I'm going on and stealing your entire show, which I do quite frequently, by the way.
I'll jump in.
Okay. You know, but I look at that and I say, oh my gosh, you know, we have programs in this country and in this world that are teaching people the exact opposite of what we need to do to get sober. We need to look at the mental health conditions. For me, it was peer pressure. You know, I was depressed. I was anxious. I couldn't get along with my family. Mom and Dad did not know how to handle me. And so I looked for an out, and I found it at 12. I could hang out with the 16-year-old boys. The first 16-ounce warm Budweiser I drank tasted like crap, but guess what it did, Randy? It took away all of my anger, all of my insecurity, all of my anxiety was gone with one can of beer. I found the miracle of life. I couldn't believe it.
Is that the numbness that so many talk about? It numbed you to the past pain, that past trauma, and everything else you were dealing with.
Yeah. And it does it incredibly well. But you know, the other thing is sugar, salt, white flour, and fat will numb you as well. Nicotine will numb you as well. Pot will numb you as well. Social media will numb you as well. News will numb you as well. Television, reality shows will numb you as well. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways we can escape dealing with reality. And that's what addictions are for. They help us escape reality momentarily. And they do a damn good job. You know, one of the largest rising addictions in the U.S. today is porn addiction. And I'll tell you, you know, it's one of the, now, we never say that there's any addiction that is more difficult than another, because that gives people a foot out the door. So if I were to say porn addiction is the most difficult addiction to overcome, everyone with a porn addiction listening right now would say, oh my God, that's why I can't get healed. Okay, it's the most difficult, right? So we don't judge like that. But we do say this. I'll work with, and Randy, this is so sad. I'll work with 24, 48-year-old men in relationships with women that cannot be intimate. They cannot keep an erection because their brain has been hijacked by porn and by the variety of porn. Well, when you're on porn and you're seeing every body shape, every type of active sexual activity you can imagine, and then you come home to the same woman every night, and she doesn't change every 30 seconds like they do on porn. She doesn't, you don't, you know, go to a different channel and look at a different variety of porn. She's the same. She looks the same. She probably smells the same and everything else, right? So these guys, they are so used, their brain has been hijacked, Randy. They're so used to seeing all different types of activity and bodies and looks and all these things that when it comes to being in love and making love with their partner, they can't. And it takes, once they get into a program like ours, it takes between 6 months and a year for them to regain their ability to have normal, intimate relations like other people. So, you know, when we talk about all of this stuff, and, you know, you know, here's a word I left out, Randy, that has a huge play, and especially in the last 6 years, 5 years, of encouraging addiction, and that is boredom. Boredom is huge in the world of addiction. And when the pandemic hit, we have a slew of new addicts because they're sent home from work. They have to work from home. You know, they're somewhat monitored, but not 100%. And all of a sudden they start, you know, eating a little bit more in the afternoon because they're bored, or they go on porn because they're bored, or instead of waiting until 8 o'clock because they're not in the office at 4 o'clock, they have a glass of wine. And all of a sudden, you know, in our books, we have a brand new book out called David Essel's Permanent Alcohol and Life Recovery. And we tell stories in there, Randy, one story after another of, in the beginning of the pandemic, all of these people succumbing to addiction, you know, for a variety of reasons. One, no money coming in. Two, they can't find labor. To my construction clients that own construction companies could not find labor. Oh my, no one wanted to work during the pandemic, you know, so their businesses are dropping. And via the stress, which is one of those emotional components that leads to addiction, if we don't have what's called the emotional regulation skills, if we don't have the skills to step back and say, okay, is having a drink right now really the best idea for me? Because I have a tendency to have 4, 6, or 8, not just one. So that's emotional regulation. You know, emotional regulation is building our self-confidence so much that we can go to that party with the guys that we normally drink, the women we normally drink, and not drink. It is possible. And I'm sitting here with many, many, many years of sobriety, of going to networking events and having a freaking blast, you know, going to music concerts without any alcohol, without any pot, without any, you know, mind altering substance, and having the blast of my life, Randy. Recovery, sobriety is so beautiful. You know, one of the things that people are going to find when they get into permanent recovery, and we don't teach anything but permanent recovery. We don't do the one day at a time crap or anything. You know, we say, hey, listen, we're going to get
stop you there.
Yeah.
You say the one day at a time crap. I'm intrigued by that. Go a little deeper with that. We understand that as one of the principles of AA. I know what some of your feelings and thoughts are. I want to hear those. Express that to us.
Yeah, Randy, you know, this was a big breakthrough for me. And I'll tell you again, going back to the suicide failed attempt, It made me really look at the world of mental health at the deepest level possible. It made me really look at, and what are we teaching in the world of addiction? And is it logical? And does it work? And so, the one day at a time thing sounds great. Like, we're just going to take it one day at a time, just get sober today. And so what I say to people is this, and I'm going to do a stereotypical example. Let's say you meet the woman of your dreams and you date for six.
I love it. I want the folks to hear it. I was going to get you a plug for that. Go ahead.
Thank you. And, so you meet the woman of your dreams and you're all excited. And, you guys have had 6 months or a year or 2 years of dating and it's just freaking bliss. And you say to her, honey, you know what? I can't think of being with anyone else than you. Will you marry me? And she freaks out, Randy. And she jumps on top of this guy, knocks him into the wall, kisses him like deeper than she's ever kissed him before, says, oh my God, yes. And then he says, okay, there's only one small catch.
Here we go, folks. Hold on.
We're going to be married one day at a time. Are you excited? Isn't that great, honey? Every day, we're going to commit to each other for one day. We're going to commit today for each other. Then tomorrow, we're going to get remarried, and we're going to commit tomorrow to the marriage. And then the next, and Randy, it's just like, are you kidding me? Any smart woman would run out of that darn room so quickly. Her clothes would fly off. She'd be running so fast. And we've been taught this stuff. And, my whole belief system is that you've got to get to a point. Now, Randy, in my teachings, everyone gets here differently. Some people get here at the 4-week mark. Some people get here at the 8-week mark. Some people get here at the 12-week mark. But we will lovingly carry people along until they understand that permanent alcohol and addiction recovery is the only answer, because people who come to me or other addiction specialists, they're coming to us because they have not been able to beat the addiction by themselves. So I'll say to people, okay, listen, you've had 15 years proven that you can't be a social drinker. Do you want another 15 years to prove you can't be a social drinker, or do you just want to permanently get recovered? You've had 30 years as a food addict. And now you're up to over 250 pounds and your doctor's telling you that, you're going to lose a leg to diabetes down the road. And, would you like to commit to permanent weight loss and recovery so you don't have to lose a leg down the road? Or you just want to do it one day at a time? And when you wake up tomorrow, you decide, I think I'll stay with her. No, I'm going to have some cookies today. Permanent recovery is a mindset. But I'm going to repeat this, Randy, because it's so unique. People just don't know where I'm coming from at all. And I say this, one of the greatest challenges of recovery is the mind and the subconscious mind that we have trained that we need this alcohol. We need to be on social media arguing. We need to argue about politics. We need to eat this food that is unhealthy. Everything gets tucked into the subconscious, and the subconscious is just a sponge. And all it does is repeat back to us what we have fed it. The subconscious can be the greatest ally in the world or the greatest saboteur. So as I continued to show my subconscious mind that I wanted, desired, and needed alcohol every night of my life for 30 years. Well, it didn't take more than 6 months for the subconscious to say, hey, I got you, brother. We're going to do something every night. If we don't drink, we'll get stoned. If we don't get stoned, we'll do LSD or something. And I fed it the pattern, Randy. It's not genetics. It's not my parents' fault. It's no one's fault. I was running away from my own emotional instability, and I found addiction as a way to temporarily give me a break. But it's only temporary, gang. And when you go permanent, and I'll give you the greatest example I can about what is the difference between one day at a time and permanent alcohol and addiction life recovery. And I'll give it to you this way. 3 years ago in January, my mother died after a 4-year hellacious battle with dementia. One of the worst diseases I've ever seen in my life. My mother was Saint Teresa. She was a church-going, God-praising, loving woman. She worked with the homeless. She, when I was 10 years old, we brought a black child from New York City into an all-white neighborhood, and we got run out of the neighborhood for the summer because my mom wanted to give this black child a break from the heat in New York City and come to Syracuse, New York, where there's lakes and there's different things to do. That was my mom. And I fell in love with my mom in my 20s. Hold on.
Take your time.
Randy, my mom had every reason in the world to kick me out of the house 100 times. Not only did she never kick me out, she never made me feel I wasn't lovable. One of the greatest
Special gift
that a parent can give a child. The child is screwing up left and right. And my mom was a disciplinarian. Oh my God, she was a freaking really strong disciplinarian, not abusive, but a very strong disciplinarian, but she never felt that I was unlovable. I mean, I praise her to God every day. I've fallen more in love with her when she's passed, especially watching her go through the 4 years of absolute hell. I just love her to death. But going back to the purpose of the story, being through that experience and seeing someone that you have, my mom was sending me in my 50s care packages every month, Randy, a pound of coffee. And, she just loved me so deeply. But through all of that challenge, and this is permanent alcohol and addiction recovery, there wasn't one time that I ever even thought about a drink. There wasn't one time I even thought about doing a line of cocaine or any drug or anything, Randy. I didn't turn to food. I didn't turn to anything. That's permanent alcohol addiction life recovery. You learn through emotional regulation how to handle the toughest of experiences without substances.
If you needed an excuse, you had a list of them at that time.
Yeah.
If that's what you wanted to use as your driving factor. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Randy, I can't say this for sure. If I was going along with this one day at a time thing, I may have questioned a couple of those days that were really hard and said, well, yeah, I committed to not drinking today, but God, seeing mom in that condition, but when you don't have that option of one day at a time, that's not an option.
It's not a thought.
It's not even a thought because we've already committed to the permanent part of it. And, I tell people when you join my program at the end of 365 days, you are going to be the most changed person in the world. People will not recognize you. And I mean that. We change everything because it's not just about alcohol. It's about life recovery. It's about recovering your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, your relationship health. It's your entire existence that is destroyed by addiction. So we're not just going to focus on the substance or the behavior. We're going to lift your whole life up to a huge new level of existence. We're going to raise your level of consciousness by thousands of points. If you are someone that loves God and loves Jesus and loves everything that has to do with the spiritual world, you're going to love this program. If you're not into God and Jesus and all that, you're going to love this program because we hit it where you need to hit it. We go to the origin. We show you why you started the addiction. We showed you, look at the benefits that are coming down the road. And then we change your life.
So you say that all addictions are a pathway to God.
Yes.
I want to throw that in here at this point. Talk to us a moment about that, and I have another one for you.
Yeah, yeah. The last I saw, about 95% of the world's population believes in God. It's a huge number. Or they believe in a higher power. If they don't call it God, they say, I believe in a higher power, which is fine with me. I don't care what name you use, doesn't matter. You could say God's name is Joshua, and I go, great. As long as you're, loving Joshua and you're using Joshua as a positive form of motivation to do good things in this world, that's excellent. Every addiction is a pathway to God because one of the greatest healing tools is faith. Another great healing tool is hope. These are all spiritual principles that we've been taught. God sits there, in my opinion, Randy, he sits there and he says, come halfway to me, son. Come halfway to me, my daughter. Do the human work. Ask for help on the human level. Let go of that substance, and I'm going to meet you halfway, and I'm going to take you to this land of the living that you have never experienced. To not wake up ever with shame or guilt, to not wake up ever with a slow brain or a hangover, to not look at your bank account and not know what you're going to do because your emotional spending was $30,000 in 30 days. He waits, I believe, Randy, and he says, listen, just show me your effort, and I'm going to come swooping in and help you. And I believe 1,000% that is the way it works, Randy.
I have always said, I'm coming to you from East Central Indiana to give you a little geography, okay?
Yeah.
And we do our share of farming around here. I have always believed that you pray to God to help you purchase that farm, to purchase that tractor. But in all my years of being, I've never seen him drive one. I'm not saying he couldn't. He may provide that field, provide that tractor. You're going to have to do the work to get the crop in the ground. You're
There
going
you
to have
go.
to be the one that takes care of the harvest. He tells us that the harvest will be big, but it's going to take a lot of workers to get it done. So
That's right.
very much what you're saying right there. We've got to take those steps forward. We can trust in him,
Yes.
believe in him. You mentioned about faith. You mentioned about hope. Indeed, we need all of that. But
Yes.
we've got to get off our hands and knees and sometimes and be
Yes.
the one providing the work, getting the job done. He'll give us the strength, the understanding. He'll give us the answer. But
That's
we've
right.
got to dig to get it sometimes. And I think we can be lazy believers, which I have to
Right.
question your belief at that point, because
Yeah.
I think it's very equal parted in that sense.
Yes.
So the positive side of addiction is bringing you into that understanding that I do need help. There
Yeah.
is a higher power.
Yeah.
Share some of that with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that again, addictions can change lives for the better in so many different ways. We do rely on faith and prayer for people that really are into faith and prayer. We know they're powerful tools. I don't believe, Randy, that there's one answer to anything in life. I think we have to find multiple tools that we use to get to certain places that we want to get to. Keeping our mind focused on the benefits, keeping our mind focused on, how we want to change and be a better person. Every addict in the world is conniving. Every addict in the world, alcoholic, food addict, drug addict, it doesn't matter. We're all conniving. We're very creative in how we keep our addictions going. And so part of the course, believe it or not, is we say, you've been so creative hiding your alcoholism, hiding your food addiction. But that's a tough one to hide because we actually usually put weight on when we have a food addiction.
Yes.
Right, but there's gambling addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction. I mean, you're not going to see it on someone's body, right? And so we really want to pay attention to what's going on in this world and what's going on inside us, and understanding that when you wake up in the morning and you don't have a craving to buy something, to masturbate, to have a drink, You don't have a craving to instantly jump on your iPhone. And here's another addiction that is horrendous. We have our clients, Randy, the first 30 minutes of every day, minimal. We ask them not to pick up any iPhone, any tablet, any computer, any television, any radio, nothing. The first 30 minutes is pure silence. And that allows us to welcome the day. We can welcome it with prayer. We can welcome it with affirmations. We can welcome it with meditation. But we say to everyone, because that phone is one of the most addictive devices ever created by man, next to the cigarette. I mean, it's an incredibly addictive device. People, 90% maybe of people have it next to their bed at night, and the first thing they do when they wake up is they turn it over, and it's the worst way to start your day. It's horrendous. We want to start it with love. We want to start it with faith. We want to start it with hope. We want to start it with changing bad habits to good habits. We want to focus. How you start your day has a huge effect
I'm
on how
picturing that 30 minutes of void from any kind of technical instrument or anything, also as a way with dealing with life's boredom. We don't have to turn back to our drug, whether that drug is a phone, a magazine, the internet, the refrigerator, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
How do I deal with 30 minutes of free time? A lot of us don't know how.
I know.
We turn that TV on to fill it, or we watch the news and we're in worse shape than we were in before.
That's right.
And so how do we move forward from that? What do you see as the reason why there's a 90% failure rate to most programs today?
Yeah.
Which means only a 10% success rate. And is recovery catching up with addiction, or are we somewhat chasing our own tail?
You said it, Randy. We're chasing our tail. And the number one reason is that 12-step organization, which is the most well-known of all the addiction organizations, refuses to update their program. So they're working out of a program created 80 years ago that is completely irrelevant to what we know today.
1939, yes?
1939.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. They had no idea about the world of psychology of what we know today, motivation, what we know today. They didn't know back then, but by repeating an affirmation, "Hi, I'm David, I'm an alcoholic," in a meeting is one of the worst things that anyone could ever do in their life, unless they have a hangover. And if you're sitting in a 12-step meeting with a hangover, you are an alcoholic, and raise your hand and say you're an alcoholic. If you're drinking and you want to keep saying you're an alcoholic in a meeting, go ahead. But for those individuals, and I feel so bad for this, Randy, for those individuals that are not drinking, that are doing their best to not cross addict, to not relapse, for them to be saying every day they go to a freaking meeting, "Hi, I'm David and I'm an alcoholic," is disgusting to me. We wonder why we have a 90% failure rate in 12-step and even in most treatment centers. And I went to a treatment center and it was expensive, and they're not effective because most of the treatment centers are running off of 12-step principles. Imagine this, Randy. You're struggling and you go into a meeting. And this is a true story that happened a couple weeks ago with one of my clients who is struggling with a porn addiction. He goes into a Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting. He sits down. This guy stands up. He says, "I'm Reverend somebody." He's a minister and he leads the group. And he says, "I just want everyone to know I was born a sex addict. I was a sex addict yesterday. I'm a sex addict today, and I'll be a sex addict for the rest of my life."
There is no cure in his mind.
In his mind,
there's no way out of it.
And that's the 12-step organization. He is a representative of the 12-step organization. They're the ones that gave him those words. They're the ones that encourage people to say, if you don't keep coming back, you're going to relapse. That's called codependency. Randy, imagine this. Randy, imagine someone contacts me and says, "David, I've been struggling with this addiction and I really want to work your program." I say, "Okay, great." And they go, "And it's permanent recovery, right?" And I say, "Yes." And they say, "Okay, how long do I have to work with you for?" And I say, "For the rest of your life." Because that's what 12-step says. If you don't keep coming back, you're going to relapse. What? Are you crazy? I'm going to go into a meeting and that says I'm going to be an alcoholic for the rest of my life. I'm going to go into a meeting and say I'm an alcoholic when I'm not drinking. I'm going to go. This is all insanity, Randy. I mean, we have When my book, before it was published, we sent it to several very high profile addiction center owners. Two of them, one in California, she used to own 10 addiction centers out there. One guy in Florida, I think he owns 6 addiction centers or something like that. When they read my book, they gave us endorsements like you wouldn't believe. Bob Long, who owned all these centers in Florida, said, every treatment center, every addiction counselor in the world should be following David Essel's book, should be using his program. We're way behind the times, and it's really true. Now, I don't think I'm the only one that knows how to do this without using 12 steps. There's other people with other programs, and if you don't want to work with me, that's great. Go work with someone else. But really look for that concept of permanence. Why do we want to have anything other than permanent recovery? What's the purpose? If you stay with the permanent concept, and again, Randy, I'll say this because it's really important. I have a doctor I'm working with. It took him 8 weeks before he said, okay, you know what? You're right. It's been 8 weeks and I've been trying to have 2 glasses of wine at night and I'm always having 4 or 6. You're right. I just have to be permanent now. And it took him that a lot of time. And then someone else will come in on the first day and say, okay, I'm done with testing. I've tested for 30 years. I've proven I can't just have one a donut, And so I'm going permanent with you, David. How someone gets there and when they get there is irrelevant to me, Randy, as long as they get there. And everyone who I work with will get there. And your lives, oh my God, like I said earlier, will be so different.
In your program, pardon this expression, I don't know a better one to use, is that your number one step to get that person to recognize the need for permanence in their recovery?
Yeah, exactly. The program that we teach walks them into that permanent place and we explain it, because 12-step has been around so long, everyone thinks it's the way, they don't know it's a 90% failure rate, right? So they just really think that it works and it must be the way. So it's going to take a while. We're a grassroots movement, right? We have people, the other day I had a guy with an anger issue and his fiance was not going to marry him, because, he would just fly off the top of the hat. So we went in and did the work. We found out the origin. He was replicating his father from 0 to 18. His father was always angry. He never had a nice thing to say. He put his young son down constantly. So we find this. He comes in to do the work and he goes, I have an addiction to anger. And as we walked through the process, he said, oh my God, I would have never known that you could be addicted to anger. But there's a benefit from getting angry. You feel powerful. You have an adrenaline surge. You feel you're right. And you feel you're superior. You're right, Randy. And that's one of the problems with addictions, Addictions can give us that false sense of strength, that false sense of confidence. And so, we eventually, it doesn't take long normally, talking about the difference between permanent recovery and a day at a time before people say, finally, it makes sense.
So we're going to kind of wrap this up here, David. The title of our podcast is Faith in Your Recovery. Go ahead and tell us what those 4 words mean to you. Faith in your recovery.
Yeah, so faith is belief in the yet unseen.
Absolutely.
Right. So people with strong faith, they know they're going to recover. So that's the first step. Just even writing down on a piece of paper, I know I will recover, period. And then when we say faith in recovery, recovery is an action term. So we have to believe we'll recover, and then we have to take action steps in the world of recovery to make it happen.
Drive the tractor.
Yes. You got to find that coach, that counselor, the therapist, whatever it is, a minister, whatever it is. As long as they have experience in addiction recovery, you got to make sure that's their gig. They love it. You have to make sure, because there's a lot of people that will cover all kinds of topics, but they don't have a passion for addiction, let's say. This is going to sound weird because I had this conversation the other day. There's a woman who's being trained to be an addiction counselor, and she's never had an addiction in her life. And she's struggling. and she's going to struggle because she doesn't have the compassion necessary to understand what it's like to try to get out of an addiction. You know, if you've been in, well, we teach people. We have a woman in Africa right now who's going to be finishing our course. We have a course where we certify people to become permanent alcohol and addiction recovery coaches. And there's a woman in Africa who's going through the certification right now. And the wild thing is, Randy, is that she's gone through, it's 40 hours long, 40 hours with me, one-on-one instruction. And then there's a ton of homework to do. And she said, David, this is going to rock our whole country of Africa. She said, if you think you're behind with 12 steps, we are so far behind you in regards to recovery. And I'm going to be bringing in this brand new information. And she's got great contacts, Randy, with insurance companies and wellness companies and all these people. I think she's going to do awesome. But this is what we're trying to do, a grassroots movement to get this permanent alcohol recovery to become the new norm instead of one day at a time.
That's what I want folks to hear today. The permanence. It's all or nothing.
Yes.
And we've proven it. Listen, thank you for your time. Thank you for the blessing. Thank you for your passion in this line of work and caring for people and what all you give to it. God bless. We want to invite our folks to stay in the battle and realize it's a battle, but you can win the war. Don't give up today. Answer may be around the next corner or in our next episode of Faith in Your Recovery, or who knows, maybe for you, it's in David's books. Check him out. Thank you. God bless.